At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve. It's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu. At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
A magic beyond anything you could ever imagine.
You are now listening to The Hunt Palmer Show. Brought to you by Sagrera Farms on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Locking down the middle of the day.
You really think that's the best idea?
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio, this is Hunt Palmer.
It's quite a piece of work.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Thursday. It means we're brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Beef. Jacob Beck, Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos, working towards the weekend. Appreciate you being with us. Luke Johnson in 15 minutes. We're talking Saints defense with Luke. Joe Healy, 30 minutes from right now. Joe, of course, with SEC Extra, part of the D1 baseball team. Big weekend for a lot of teams in the Southeastern Conference. We'll talk about that with Joe. Alex Bregman is on an absolute tear. I want to mention that a little bit. And Chris Blair, voice of the Tigers, with us at 2:15. So very much looking forward to the next couple of hours. Lock us in. Let's get rolling the same way we do every day. That's our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's opening drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
It's resume time in college baseball. This dawned on me today as I was sitting at my kitchen counter, bouncing the 8-week-old in the little bouncy chair to keep him quiet as I was doing some work this morning. And I'm rolling through the RPIs and I'm rolling through all the metrics, and I'm looking at this going, I don't think there's anything I do all year that I like doing more than this. That probably makes me the biggest nerd alive. But as far as covering the sports that I cover, the time of year that we go through each and every year, and it kind of gets cyclical, whether it's fall camp or, obviously training camp for the Saints, fall camp for LSU, or it's March Madness. It's no matter what the time of year is, like there's something that we're generally talking about. And this time of year, you're generally talking about LSU's resume and where it stacks up. Hopefully, you're talking about a top 8. Sometimes you're talking about trying to get a top 16 like they were in 2022. And sometimes you're trying to get into the field like last year. In any way you slice it, I just am interested in it because there are so many moving parts. There's so much volatility. It's not like college football in this way now that we have a committee for college football, because they play once a week and then it changes and we talk about it for a week and nothing changes. It's not like college basketball where, yeah, maybe you're on the 6 line, maybe you're on the 8 line, maybe you're on the 4 line, maybe you're on the 9 line. But there's more volatility to this because there's so much value in being a top 8 and there's so much value in being 16 as opposed to 17. So no matter where you are, how much success you've had, if you're looking at this, I would suggest Missouri has no interest in this right now, South Carolina has no interest in this right now, and quite honestly, Texas has no interest in this right now. The other 13 teams have to pay attention to this. There are some that are trying to work their way on the hosting site. That's like Ole Miss, Alabama, those teams. There are some that are trying to get a top 8. That's LSU, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Auburn, Georgia. There are teams that are trying to get in. Mississippi State is on the back end of this thing. Kentucky is on the back end of this thing. So it just, to me, it's always fascinating. And I know that when I have the sheet in front of me and I can go through it with the numbers staring me in the face, it's really easy to digest. I know that you don't have that, generally speaking, when you're listening. You're driving on I-10 or you're on the sales route, or maybe you're jogging, listen via podcast, and like you don't have that information right in front of you. So I try to make it as easy for those of you that are just listening as possible. And we're just going to talk about LSU and how they stack up right now. I think most of you are on the same page that we understand that in LSU's best interest to win 4 of the last 6 league games. That's kind of the starting point. But the question becomes like, why and how imperative is it that you win 4 of the last 6 before you get to Hoover? And so I wrote a piece up at LouisianaSports.net right now. It's called Resume Review. It's on the top of the page. You can go to it on your mobile site, go to it on your desktop. It's free. It says LSU's in a solid spot entering a tough weekend. And that is true. As Arkansas comes to the box, it is 2 things. It is a massive opportunity for LSU because Arkansas is number 4 in the RPI, and they are 2 games clear of LSU in the SEC standings. So you've got an opportunity to score massive wins against an elite team to greatly enhance your resume. It's a great opportunity in that way. It's also a daunting task because there aren't many teams that LSU can play where I would look at it and go, man, if you're not careful, you can lose all 3 of these games. And Arkansas is one of those. Like, I don't think they're going to come to the box and sweep LSU, but they can. They're that good. They embarrassed Texas last weekend. Now, that was in Fayetteville, but it was a domination for 3 days. This is a really good Arkansas team. Yesterday I did power rankings. I ranked them first in the SEC because I think their best is as good as anybody in the country. So this is a massive opportunity and a scary spot. You're towing that line if you're LSU. The point of my story on LouisianaSports.net and what I'll relay here is there are some metrics that LSU has that are very strong in their favor. There are some that I think are very neutral, just kind of treading water. And there are some weaknesses in LSU's resume to this point, and I wanted to kind of talk about that. Right now, as far as the strong metrics go, LSU is 8th in the RPI. That is strong. You want to be in the top 10, top 11 in the RPI to get that top 8 national seed. So right now, you're 8th, and you're about to play number 4 3 times. As long as you don't get swept, your RPI is not going anywhere this weekend. You win a couple, yeah, you might jump to 6 or 5. You lose 2 and win 1, you're probably right around 8 or 9. Like it's not very volatile with Arkansas in town because you're going to get strength of schedule points and you're going to get high RPI points, quadrant 1 wins. So LSU's in a strong spot from an RPI perspective. You're 15 and 9 in the SEC. That's tied for 3rd. Texas is out in front. Arkansas is right behind them. And then LSU and Georgia are right there tied at 15 and 9. So 3rd place in the nation's best conference by a mile is a very advantageous place to be in. And I think that while the committee would suggest they don't take that into account, I think it's just human nature. If you finish 3rd in the SEC, you're getting a top 8. I feel confident in saying that. So that's a strong metric for LSU right now. And then you've got 10 quadrant 1 wins. There are 8 teams in the country that have more than 10. But it's still a good number. And you've got 3 opportunities this weekend to add to that number. Unfortunately for LSU, South Carolina got annihilated by Florida last weekend in Columbia, and that knocked South Carolina out of the top 60. Road games in the top 60 give you quad 1 opportunities, and South Carolina is just outside that. So maybe South Carolina does some work against Auburn this weekend. I tend to doubt it, but you're probably not getting quad 1 opportunities in Columbia next weekend, unfortunately. But 10 quad 1 wins right now is a pretty good metric for LSU. So what are the metrics that are pretty neutral that don't really matter, that aren't going to be massively impactful at this point? Strength of schedule is not in LSU's camp. It's not really against them. They're 30th. Auburn's 2nd, Georgia's 6th, Vanderbilt's 3rd, TCU's 13th. Those are all strong metrics for potential top 8s. But there are other teams like Oregon State, who's worse than LSU, North Carolina's worse, Coastal Carolina's worse, Tennessee is worse than LSU. So LSU's going to get a boost from 30th by playing Arkansas, but you're still not going to be in the top 10, and you're not going to be in the 50s. So strength of schedule is not really a big factor for LSU. And then while I said the 10 quad 1 wins are solid, you're actually 10 and 9 against quad 1, which is just okay. It's certainly not going to hurt. 10 and 9 against quad 1 is not going to hurt you. But I'm not calling for a sweep either way this weekend. So your quad 1 record is going to be something like 11 and 11, 12 and 10, something that's pretty neutral. So while the wins are good, and that does matter, you're not like 12-2. You're 12-10. So it's kind of a wash for the metrics perspective. Now you're looking at things that may hurt LSU. Here are the things that can hurt LSU. There are 5 SEC teams with a better RPI than LSU. That can hurt. If you think that the committee may cap SEC teams, having 5 teams in front of you in the RPI, which happen to occupy the top 5 spots in the RPI, hurts. LSU's non-conference strength of schedule, terrible. 209th in the country. Only Tennessee has a worse non-conference strength of schedule in the top 20 of the RPI than LSU. Now, I think, personally, Hunt Palmer thinks that the 30 games, which is more than half of your 56, 55 in LSU's case, the 30 SEC games should carry more weight than your non-conference strength of schedule. But in any event, it's bad. So that's something to keep an eye on. The Missouri factor, which I detailed last week, if they go 0-30, they could use that as a data point in the committee room. I don't know if they will or not, but it's possible. That's bad for LSU. And lastly, Auburn is a problem for LSU because LSU obviously got swept at Auburn, and Auburn's got a higher RPI and a better strength of schedule. So,
with so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
that's an issue. LSU's 2 games clear of Auburn in the SEC standings, but it could be a potential issue. I'll leave it with this. As we sit right here, I believe 2 teams have locked up top 8 national seeds. Texas is 19-5 in the league. They're going to win 20, 21, 22, 23 games in league play. They're a lock for a top 8. And Arkansas at this point is 17-7. Theoretically, LSU could sweep them, and then the last weekend of the year, they could lose 2 out of 3 against Tennessee. That's conceivable, where they would finish with 18 wins. I'm really not betting on that with Arkansas. I think they're that good. I'm going to call them a lock for now. I realize lock means it's over, but I think for the sake of this discussion, it's reasonable if I give you those talking points to say Arkansas and Texas are going to get top 8 national seeds. Then there's a group of 8 behind those 2. Very simply, Georgia, Auburn, Vanderbilt, LSU from the SEC. Georgia, Auburn, Vanderbilt, LSU. Then you go to the ACC for Florida State, Clemson, and North Carolina. And then you've got an independent now, no longer in the Pac-12, an independent in Oregon State. That group has really high RPIs and similar metrics. And then you've got 2 more spots on the outside. Tennessee, whose RPI is 13 behind LSU. And then you've got the Big 12 champion, whoever that's going to be. It could be West Virginia or TCU for the sake of this discussion. West Virginia's RPI is 22. That's not great, but if they win the Big 12 by a few games, they could conceivably get a top 8 because of that conference championship win. And then you got TCU, who's an RPI 14, very good, could theoretically, if they win the Big 12, get a top 8 national seed. But that list is in total 13 teams. 13 teams. So mathematically, you've got to take 8 spots from those 13 teams. That's what I've boiled this down to. And again, if this is a little bit confusing as you drive around, I understand. I'm trying to be as transparent as possible, but it's all written on LouisianaSports.net if you want to go check it out. But I think LSU needs to be in the top 8 of what looks to me to be 13 teams right now. And you hope the Big 12 champion kind of dwindles back a little bit. You hope that one of Vanderbilt, Auburn, or Georgia scuffles down the stretch. And then obviously LSU's got to win some baseball games. I would suggest LSU's in a healthy spot right now. That's what yesterday's predictions from Baseball America and D1 Baseball, where they had LSU as the number 4 national seed and the number 6 national seed, respectively. That's what it suggests, that they're in a pretty good spot, but it's tenuous. Like, you screw around this weekend and don't play very well, and you can fall out of this mix quickly. Like, if LSU gets swept this weekend against Arkansas, you're not a top 8 right now. You win 2 out of 3, you have almost jumped into the lock territory, unless you just fall on your face in Columbia. So I think as I tie that discussion all together, everyone kind of knows where LSU stands, but I also think that it helps to put a little context in it, because there are two pieces of this pie that I think are 50-50. Maybe 60-40. 60, like LSU's got to take care of its business, but the other 40% here is how everybody else does, and that is a huge variable. It's LSU's opponents for the RPI points. It's the teams LSU's competing against for the top 8 seeds. Like, everybody's very volatile, and that's what I kind of opened with. Like, they're all going to play 3 games this weekend. That's a huge swing. Violent stuff. And it's fascinating to me. And so I'm going to continue to update it weekly on LouisianaSports.net, maybe daily on a conference tournament week. But as usual, LSU controls its own destiny. You win like 5 of your last 6. You beat Arkansas 2 out of 3 and then go to Columbia and sweep them. Like, slam the door. It's over. Probably with 4 out of 6 too. 3 out of 6, you got a fight on your hands. Big fight on your hands. So we'll see how that all goes. That's your resume review, courtesy of LouisianaSports.net, right here on your Genesis opening drive. Luke Johnson talking Saints when we come back on The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
Shout out to Sean Sagrera and the folks at Sagrera Farms. Premium Angus beef, top 1% beef in the world. You can find it 35 minutes from Baton Rouge. Sagrera Farms. Always happy to tell you about them on our Thursday shows. Tell you more about them as we move forward. Let's head out to Jim's Firearms Hotline. Chat with our guy Luke Johnson of The Advocate, covering the New Orleans Saints. Luke, how are we doing?
I'm doing great, man, outside of the fact that the Pope is canceled for being a Cubs fan.
The Pope is a Cubs fan. We now have Kyle Tucker and God. If anybody in the NL Central thinks they have any shot of taking down the Cubs, you have no chance.
I guess we're gonna get a good sense of just how present God is in the world right now.
We shall see. The Cubs got the Mets tonight. We'll see how we can handle things. Somebody said on Twitter's been on fire. Somebody said the God saw the Cubs give up 9 runs in the 11th inning on Tuesday and gave him the Pope a day later, which is actually true. So we'll see if that can help my beloved Cubbies. Let's talk.
I think my favorite one was Chicago now has more Popes than 4,000-yard passers.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you this, and I did not know this until like an hour and a half ago. Pope Twitter is on fire. Everybody's firing off takes about the Pope at this point. So let's talk about the Saints to transition into in a Catholic way. I want to talk defense with you. For a long time there, we just kind of assumed, all right, the Saints have this guy and this guy and this guy. They're going to be pretty damn good on defense. And then they really weren't at the end of the Dennis Allen era. And they still got a lot of those cast of characters. Is there any tread left on the tires of Cam Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu, and Demario Davis at this point?
Yeah, but I don't think that they're going to be star players. You know, like I don't think that's fair to ask that of them at this stage in their careers. I still think Tyrann played some decent ball last year when he was at his best. Just as somebody who's taking the football away, and then I think injuries caught up to him, and frankly, just wasn't a very good tackler last year. Like, that was a problem. I think they addressed that by going out and getting somebody like Justin Reed, who can kind of cover up some of that stuff. You can kind of put Tyrann back in more of a playmaking role. I think he can still be a good player. Demario, I think, is still a good player in specific aspects, but he's not like the complete all-around player that he was, 4 years ago. And with Cam, I mean, we saw a little bit more out of him last year after they fired Todd Grantham. I just don't think I don't think these guys are Pro Bowl players anymore, but I think they can still be useful players, especially considering what they've added around them. I think the big question is, how this scheme is going to fit the personnel, and whether they can make a realistic jump forward with that. I don't know. It might be next year that we're really looking at this defense being improved.
What do you put into, because you're around the locker room a good bit with these guys, how much stock do you put into the fact there's a new sheriff in town here with a new coach, a new coaching staff? It's not the same old blood. And those guys that I just mentioned are consummate professionals. Like, how important is that as you try to change things in New Orleans?
I mean, I do think that there's value to that, to having those guys around as part of a transition. I think that's really helpful. When they talk in the locker room, guys listen. I mean, every one of those guys, they're really, really important to the team in that regard. And when you're going through this sort of cultural transition, structural transition, everything with this organization outside of the front office is in transition right now. So I think those guys in that specific role can play a big part in kind of getting this thing back on track. Like, as players on the field, maybe not, maybe not as much as they used to, but like in terms of just getting buy-in from the rest of that unit, I think that's going to be a critical part of what they do this year.
Who's the biggest building block on the defense?
Man, I don't think I have an answer for you, honestly. Like, I think Alontae Taylor has shown flashes of being a really good player, really impactful player, but I just don't know what to make of him. They've just kind of like flip-flopped him throughout his entire career. I don't think he's been able to really settle in and be great at one thing. So I'm really curious to see, later on this month when they line up for their mini camps and whatnot, like what Brandon Staley wants to do with him. Like, is he going to be that star position for him, right, where he's just kind of all over the field and being the guy who makes plays in space? Are they going to want to like lock him in at outside corner? Like, I think it would probably be the former. I think he's probably the guy that you're looking at as okay, we can kind of build around him and his talents. But like, he's got to show he can do it like consistently. And this is a big year for him. So he's about to enter. Like, he's entering his contract year. Yeah. So I think he's the one that I feel best about on this team. But then, like, I know Chase Young's never been a 10-sack guy, but like,
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
He's still 25.
That's
and
crazy. It was crazy in the fall, and it's crazy now.
Yeah, and he's coming off like really his first healthy off season in a long time. Like, I think there's a chance that they get a lot out of him this year. And maybe he's just who he is. Like, and I think that's okay too. Like, he's still a productive player if he's not going to be like the Myles Garrett 15 sack a year guy. Like, maybe we kind of thought he was early in his career. But I think he has a chance to really blossom if he can stay healthy, if he's healthy throughout this offseason, he's working out and, maybe put into a scheme that can really maximize his strengths.
Is there a draft pick in particular that you think could have the biggest impact on the defense?
Yeah, I think it's Quincy Riley, honestly.
Okay.
I really like him as a player. He's not like their kind of typical corner. He's a little smaller than what they've gone for in the past with these Dennis Allen defenses, where they kind of have prioritized length over everything. He's long for his size, right? I think he's 5'11", but he's got long arms to go with that. But like, I think he's going to be potentially pressed into a starting role, which is kind of scary, because they don't really know what he is, outside of what they saw in his college film. But like, out of all their picks, I think he's got the potential to play the most snaps on their defense outside of Kelvin Banks and potentially Tyler Shuck.
This is an impossible question to answer, but I want your opinion on it. Last year at this point, there was absolutely no way you would ever think towards the future because there may not be a future for Dennis Allen, for Derek Carr, for some of those guys. At this point, you got a first-year head coach and maybe a rookie quarterback. Is there anything that you think they might do personnel-wise that may take some lumps on the front end but help them down the road because they know that they're kind of pushing off the dock here? Is that just not in the Saints' DNA at all?
You mean like in terms of like acquiring players or just
playing
like
a younger guy,
putting guys? Yeah, I mean, I do think there's probably a need for that, right? Especially if the Derek Carr situation resolves and him not playing for the team this year, right? Your potential to be a contending team. I mean, with Derek Carr, it's not great, right? And without him, it's even worse. So I think in that sort of scenario, then yeah, like I think I would try to see what some of these young guys got, and see who out of this this particular draft class, out of last year's draft class, who out of those guys can really be players for you and can be guys you can build around. Like maybe somebody like Jonas Sanker it turns out to be just an absolute stud, or Danny Stutzman. Like let them go out there, take some lumps, but see what they got potential wise. And yeah, when you're looking at the way this roster is built right now, I mean, next year they're going to have some tough cap stuff to manage. Derek Carr, I think it's like $59 million next year on their cap. And that's going to be something they have to deal with regardless of what happens with him this year. But then you look at 2027, it's like all these big contracts that are on their cap that they have had to rework year after year after year and dig themselves out of this big hole. They're all gone.
Yeah.
So like they actually are lined up to be in a really, really good spot cap wise in 2027. So if you go through a tough year this year, you can see what you got in these young guys, and you can really set yourself up to really jump off 2 seasons from now, which I think it's that if I was a Saints fan, I'd be excited about that. I'd be excited about like really ushering in a new era here. But it would go against like the way they've done business. Right. And like, I could totally see them trying to make a play for somebody like Keenan Allen, right. Who fills a need for him instead of giving somebody like Bub Means like, hey, go out there and show us what you can do. Or, another one of these veteran corners who's out there on the free agent market. Like, they are a team that just, it is in their DNA to try to do everything they can to win right now, even if like maybe the healthier long-term option is to just see what you got in the youngsters and think about the future.
We'll see. I wish they would play some of the young guys and see. That seemed to make sense to me, but again, it's just not what they generally do. What's y'all's schedule coming up? You going to see minicamp on Saturday? Is that right?
Yeah, Saturday. They actually open minicamp maybe today. I think they open rookie minicamp today, but we don't get access until Saturday. So we'll get out there. We'll get our first look at Kelvin Banks, Tyler Shuck, and the rest. And I think there's going to be some really interesting stuff out of there. Like, what position do they line Kelvin Banks up at? Last year they lined Fuaga up at left tackle in rookie minicamp. You're like, okay, well, that's probably what he's going to play. I think there's some potential to get some really interesting stuff out of this weekend.
We'll talk next week. Thanks, Luke.
Yep, sounds good, buddy.
Luke Johnson with the Advocate Saints beat reporter at @ByLukeJohnson on Twitter for all your Saints coverage. Go check him out. He's with us every single Thursday. We'll step aside. Joe Healy talking SEC baseball next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Beef. Huge weekend all across the Southeastern Conference. Just 2 regular season weekends left. Arkansas and LSU, maybe the highlight series of them all, but there are plenty that mean a lot to a lot of teams around the SEC. To break it down, go to our guy Joe Healy, part of the D1 baseball team with SEC Extra, with us on Thursdays on the Jim's Farms Hotline. Joe, how are you?
Doing well, Hunt.
frankly don't know how we got here, but yeah, 2 weeks left in the regular season. It feels like you just wake up and it's like, oh, yep, okay, we're here at the business end.
It is, and it's the most fun time of year. I was talking about at the top of the show. Let's briefly go back to last weekend before we look at a monster weekend to come. As Wes Rucker of Go Vols 24/7 eloquently put it, Mount Vitello finally blew in the series against Auburn. He gave a lot of umpires a lot of peace of his mind. His team is not playing well. They've lost, I believe, 4 or 5 series and 3 in a row at home. Are they okay, or are they in big trouble?
I think they're okay, but it is time to maybe readjust what their ceiling is, because I don't see them kind of in the same conversation as I do LSU and Arkansas and Texas, right? Like, I may not see them in the same. They have a better record than Auburn, but right now Auburn's playing a lot better, right? So, like, I just don't necessarily see them in that elite group, however you want to group that. And it's not just that the results are not ideal. It's also just that we've had enough time now that I think it's pretty clear that, A, the team they play great when Liam Doyle's on the mound. They seem to get a lot of energy from that, not so much when everybody else is on the mound. But beyond that, the lineup is just not as scary. They don't play defense as well. Their bullpen is not as deep. Okay, Nate Snead's a nice piece, but he's kind of the only guy I in my heart of hearts, I feel like they actually trust. There's a bunch of other guys that have good stuff and have good moments, but, they wish they had 4 Nate Sneads, basically. And last year they did, and this year they don't. And so it's a bunch of little things that have contributed to it. And I think there's also an element of let's not forget about the fact that guys last year, like, even though Christian Moore didn't always, he had some antics that I think a lot of folks didn't like, but his teammates loved him, and he was clearly a glue guy for that team. Same with Blake Burke. And those were guys who had been in the program a long time. And when you look at how this roster is constructed with a lot of one-year guys, Gavin Keelan and Andrew Fisher and Liam Doyle, and I'm not saying those guys are bad guys. I'm just saying that when you lose guys who have been tent poles of your program for a long time, and all you're left with in terms of long-term tent poles is Hunter Inslee, you just don't maybe have the same team chemistry. So I think there's probably about a million things going on with the Volunteers, and this weekend against Vanderbilt got a lot more interesting because I would not have thought that to be a competitive series just 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah, we'll certainly talk about it. Arkansas and Texas over the weekend, it was kind of a deal where you thought that might be coming, and then it did. What'd you take away from it?
Yeah, exactly that. Although I don't know that I would have expected Arkansas, even if you told me they swept, I wouldn't have expected it to be just that they absolutely wore out Texas all 3 days. But that's what it was. Like, Texas was never really in that series. There were a couple moments when it was close early in games, but they were just never really in it. 2 things there. One is that I honestly think it's probably one of the better things that could have happened to Texas, because no one's really asking any tough questions about Texas because it was Arkansas, a team that we all like, everyone seems to like. I think they're probably the best team in the SEC if you really made me pick. So nobody really looks sideways at Texas for it happening. And, oh, by the way, I do think it is just a good wake-up call. And I think we saw that with the way Schlossnagle managed some of the stuff over the weekend where, he had situations where he was pulling guys out in the middle of games because he didn't like the effort. He didn't like what they were putting on the field. And I think that's him sending a message of, look, if you guys thought we were just going to cakewalk to an SEC title and then be the number 1 overall seed and have a chance to win a national title just because we're Texas and we're playing great, you got another thing coming. And then on the flip side for Arkansas, it gets them back on track. Like, they've been playing fine and had just been getting beat. Now they're losing 2 of 3 every weekend. They were never getting swept, but it gets them back on their feet. And it shows once again that, look, their best, I think, this is what I come down on. Their best, I think, is better than anybody else's best just because they're so well-rounded. They can do a lot of things well and don't really seem to have any obvious holes when they're playing well.
Yeah, I've said the same thing this week for sure, and we'll get to see them up close and personal starting tomorrow. I'll go to LSU and A&M, and then we'll look forward. Very competitive series, incredible effort by Anthony Ianson, and then a great swing at the end by Caden Sorrell. Did you learn more about A&M, learn more about LSU? What'd you think?
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Well, I think I learned quite a bit about LSU on both ends, right? I feel like it was more instructive to me for LSU, but that doesn't necessarily mean – I don't mean that in a bad way necessarily, because I do think we have solidified at this point
that Anderson and Ianson are pick your 1 and 2 elsewhere in the country, and I'm probably still taking Anderson and Ianson as a 1-2. I mean, we've seen that enough now to where I feel pretty confident in that. On the negative side, though, is I do think this whole like LSU doesn't hit lefties well thing I think is real. And I think they really got exposed against an A&M team that like has nothing but lefties somehow. That's just kind of how they're built. So that was a particularly bad matchup, and I think we saw that. So in the big picture, I don't think a lot changed for me in terms of how I think about LSU. I think what they struggled with, they continue to struggle with, but I thought on the mound to be able to do what they did against an A&M lineup that, yes, it's not the best lineup in the SEC, but what got A&M going is the fact that their lineup was getting a lot better. And this is really the first weekend in a while for A&M where, I guess, except against Texas, it's been rare, I guess I should say, that a pitching staff has quieted their bats to the extent that LSU did, and I came away pretty impressed with that.
LSU will see a tough lefty tomorrow. Zach Root was awesome against Texas. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, he's one of the more difficult pitchers in the SEC to hit from this standpoint. He has a big-time stuff, fastballs, mid. He can really reach back for high 90s if he needs it, but it's more mid-90s. But here's the tricky part. Because of that, and because he has good off-speed stuff as well, you don't want to get into 2-strike counts against him because, if you're guessing with 2 strikes against Zach Root, you're pretty much toast. The problem is when the fastball is really going good for him, it sinks, and he gets a ton of ground balls. So your other option is to be aggressive early in the count. But if he's locating his sinker, that's just going to mean a bunch of ground balls. And that's a formula for, well, it just shows you why Zach Root is as good as he is. So that's the thing. I mean, last week he threw 8 innings in his start and did that in 99 pitches. And he struck out 11 batters. So he can still strike out dudes. The fact that he had 11 strikeouts, only threw 99 pitches in 8 innings, tells you that, yeah, he's getting strikeouts, but he's also getting a lot of outs early in counts. And that's really what makes him tough. It's kind of a damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Gage Wood is next up. I want to hear your thoughts on him in Arkansas's rotation, and then what can we expect, if anything, from Gabe Gackle and where they may use him?
Yeah, I think, my assumption is they're going to continue to piggyback those two guys together. So I think you'll see them back-to-back because Gackle's still a guy they want to use 3-4 innings at a time. In terms of Gackle's usage, it really hasn't changed a lot. It's just that he's not starting the game anymore, and I think it's taken some pressure off of him because the way Gackle's stuff works, every pitch is either a swing and miss pitch or it's a ball out of the zone. And when you're a starter, that's a tough way to live. If you don't have pitches you can land for strikes consistently, or you're able to just kind of pitch to contact, if you're not able to do those things, it's kind of tough. And so that's what we'd see with him is he'd have 3 or 4 good innings, but he'd walk some guys. His pitch count would get up. He'd start to give in to hitters because he realized that he was just walking too many guys. In the bullpen, it's like, okay, maybe I throw 3 1/3, maybe I throw 4, maybe I throw 2 2/3, but I'm just going to get my best pitch off every single pitch and trust that that's going to work. And in a relief role, it does. Gage Wood is interesting to me. I kind of keep waiting. He's been great since coming back. The velocity is fully back. I mean, he's a guy who can, tease triple digits anyway. I am waiting for someone to push him, though. Like, he really doesn't feel like he's been pushed. Like, not a ton of stressful innings since coming back, except for the first start back, which he was, really not going deep in that game. It seems like he hasn't had stressful innings. He hasn't had teams really work counts against him well. And we'll see if LSU can do that. But I am fascinated to see that because it'll give me an idea of, okay, is he a viable number 2 behind Root, or is it a situation where they're always going to have to piggyback Gackle with Root to put together a good, quote-unquote, start in a way?
We're sweating national seed here. Obviously, you want to be in the top 8, and I'm looking at the top 5 in the RPI, and they're all SEC teams. Now, 2 of those are Auburn and Vanderbilt, who LSU's got a sizable lead on as far as the conference standings. How much does LSU need to worry about an Auburn team that is 13-11 in the league, but has South Carolina this weekend starting tonight and swept LSU?
Yeah, I think that is a worry because unless South Carolina does something that none of us anticipate, I think Auburn's at bare minimum winning that series, and if I had to bet, I'm guessing they're sweeping it. So I just don't think Auburn's going anywhere, and that comparison's always going to be tough when you're talking about a sweep of Team X versus Team Y. That comparison's never going to go well for Team Y. The other thing is that one of my biggest critiques of the committee is they've done a pretty good job over the years, not necessarily queuing directly to the RPI. It still happens sometimes, not every time, but one place that they unwaveringly queue close to the RPI is when you're talking about top 8 seeds.
Yep.
And so if you're LSU, the win total matters in SEC, But what matters more is the RPI. Now, the good news is you're playing Arkansas. Your RPI is, even at home, your RPI is not going anywhere. So that's the good news. But, of course, you're going to have to win some games there because if you lose, the RPI does maybe fall a little bit, or at a bare minimum, you just start to stack up really negatively compared to the other teams you're going to be in competition with for those top 8s.
Where are you going this weekend?
It's another home weekend for me.
Wow.
I put 2 of them together. Just
it's a homestand.
Rest up before. That's right. Yeah, a full homestand. Now, I'm still getting out and doing some broadcasting for ESPN Plus. I'm going to be at ECU UTSA tomorrow night broadcasting that game. So I'm still getting out and seeing some games, but I'm going to be on the couch again and kind of trying to figure out what's what with these teams before we see them in Hoover, which of course will be here before we know it.
Yeah, you need to get some sleep over the next 2 weeks because I can't promise much of any when it comes to the week of Hoover. So do that, and we'll talk next week, Joe.
All right, see you, buddy.
Joe Healy, D1 Baseball's SEC Extra team. No better time to get involved with SEC Extra than right now because it is crunch time with 2 weeks to go in SEC play. If you're looking for a team to root for this weekend, other than LSU, South Carolina. It's going to be difficult. You can cheer for Coach Maneri. You probably may not win very much because they're 5-19 in the league, but they start tonight against Auburn. If South Carolina can find a way to win a game or two in that series on the Plains, that would help LSU greatly in trying to get a top 8 national seed. Step aside, come back, close out hour 1 next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com is that website. Every car that is on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. Every single new purchase, 10 years, 100,000-mile warranty. 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. Every new purchase, 3 years of complimentary valet maintenance. It's an experience to be a Genesis driver. And my guess is, and speaking to the folks over at Genesis and speaking to you, like most folks haven't gotten behind the wheel of Genesis. Most folks haven't gone to the dealership at Airline and Pico to see it firsthand. It's brand new, comparatively speaking, only about 2 years old. Go see them. Go get behind the wheel. See the difference in driving a Genesis. It's genesisofbatonrouge.com, genesisofbatonrouge.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
Got any steak eaters out there? I'd imagine we do. I'm certainly one. And if you are, undoubtedly you've had great steaks and not a very good steak, right? What if I could tell you you could know? You would know every single time it was going to be a great steak. That'd be something you were interested in? I'd imagine so. Sagrera Farms Premium Beef can help you out with that. It's a hidden gem right here, just outside Baton Rouge. Sean Sagrera and his team just do an incredible job up there. What do I mean when I say you know it's a great steak? Well, they score these steaks based on IMF scores, intramuscular fat scores. And you're talking about select being under 4%. Choice, 4 to 8%. Prime steaks are 9% or better. Prime is 9%. He had a vet out to Sagrera Farms last week, and they did some ultrasounds. He's got cows out there that we know have 12, 14, 17, 18% IMF scores. This is some of the finest beef in the world, and it's right outside of Baton Rouge. Why wouldn't you want to stock your freezer with that? Fillets, ribeyes, strips, ground beef, flank steak, whatever the case may be, whatever your choice is. You can get the sides or the whole cow, stock your freezer, and have it ready for the summer for grilling season. It's time to get out on the grills, get out on the pits, and you can have the finest beef from Sagrera Farms right here just outside Baton Rouge. Sean's fanatical about this stuff. I love talking to him about it. You can go up there, visit the farm, talk to him, look at your beef, and then have it packed up and ready to go. Send right on home to you. Sagrera Farms, they bring you our Thursday shows each and every week. I wanted to briefly talk about this before we get out of here in hour number 1. There was a story written on ESPN.com where a couple of the folks over there on the website polled anonymously and spoke anonymously to some executives around the league about other draft picks that their franchises didn't make. And so at times my skepticism kind of shows here where I'm like, you kind of just make this up, like if you're not putting a name on it. But the other part of me goes, well, maybe you get people to really speak truthfully as long as their name's not attached to it, right? So here's some of the things that some of the executives around the NFL had to say about the Saints selections without their name on it. Speaking of Kelvin Banks, one executive in the NFL said he's awesome. He's Laramie Tunsil, which Laramie Tunsil's made 5 Pro Bowls in the NFL. So that's pretty high praise from one. The scouts thought he was a clear-cut top 10 pick, the story says, but some mock drafts had him in the teens, maybe around 20. But the consensus around the league was that Banks is a really, really good player. An AFC executive spoke about Tyler Shough, said he was a hot name on day 2. Sounds like he would have gone pretty quickly if not for New Orleans. He's got some of what Kellen Moore really likes at the position: intelligence, good makeup, needs to improve his accuracy at the next level. But that's high praise from an AFC executive that's saying, hey, everybody was on this guy on day 2, and the Saints stepped up and made that selection. It's obvious that there's nothing really more important for the New Orleans Saints right now than Tyler Shough's development. That could change 11 months from now. If Shough goes out there and is awful and the Saints go 2-15 because he can't play at this level and you're right back at the top of the draft next year, then the development of Tyler Shough probably takes a backseat to whoever you take next year. But right now, for right here, right now, there's nothing really more important than that. And to get an executive from another conference who clearly scouted Shough and has spoken to people around the league about him to say that he's got exactly what Kellen Moore wants and a lot of the league was thinking right along the same lines of the Saints is at least comforting, if not, it doesn't guarantee anything, but it's suggesting the Saints didn't reach here. And that was really what I was hoping for, because I felt like if you were going to go up at 9 for Jackson Dart or go up at 9 for Shedeur Sanders, like it felt like that's a reach. And you didn't have to reach. It doesn't sound like the Saints did that. It sounds like they took a guy right where he was going to go in the draft, and now you've hitched your wagon to him for the future, however long that is. Could be 1 year, could be 10. Just depends on whether or not it works. And that's the battle that most organizations around the NFL are fighting year in and year out until you're not fighting it, and then you try to win while you're outside of this purgatory that the Saints have found themselves in looking for a quarterback. So there's just some interesting nuggets from ESPN.com. They also talk about Fadil Diggs and some of his characteristics as a team captain at 2 different schools. But that's a late round pick. So if you'd like to read more about it, you certainly can over at ESPN.com. A lot to cover in the first hour here on this Thursday. Talked about LSU's resume as it relates to a top 8 national seed. That story's up at LouisianaSports.net, or you can listen to the top of the show. Luke Johnson chatted about the Saints defense a little bit earlier. You can catch that at Hunt on Saints, wherever you find your sound. And then Joe Healy, always good enough to give us a little bit of time here on Thursdays talking SEC baseball. Hour 2 is locked and loaded. Chris Blair, the voice of the Tigers, in 20 minutes. We'll also talk about Alex Bregman because he is red hot. We'll do that after Sports Center when we come back on a Thursday edition of The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Breaking news from the stadium tonight as an anonymous fan foot the bill for 55,000 hot dogs, bringing that sweet tubed meat to everyone in attendance.
Free dogs! Yeah!
55,000 hot dogs? What does that even cost? While the identity of this Frankfurter philanthropist remains anonymous, their all-beefy generosity will go down in history.
The new Mega Millions. More to win means more to give. How you spend it is up to you.
Yeah! For game odds and details, visit SCEducationLottery.com.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.